Yes. Hello, beautiful people. Hello, and welcome to another edition of What is the Time, a podcast about celestial time and personal sovereignty and living what getting is good. It is, as always, your boy Zamboni, your DJ for the affair, where we'll be getting down and won't be coming up for air. Thank y'all so much for being here. I am sorry for having left you in the lurch for so long. I have been very busy and trying to recover a little bit. I had a trip out to New York for the plant cutting conference, which was amazing. It was a really good situation. I was very honored to be there and had a good talk and had good chats with the homies and everything. But it was also a difficult voyage, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So then when I got back, I was just dead tired. I was exhausted. I was exhausted on the way out, and then I somehow made it, but then had trouble getting my life back together after that. And so I haven't been doing as much and then it was the eclipse immediately after that. There was a big solar eclipse in Leo. And that, I think, is the thing that I really want to talk about today, is how how South Node eclipses in Leo are how I expect them to look in the cultural zeitgeist. But one thing about Leo is the space, it's the land of the sun, it's the domicile of the sun, and it is very much about attention and visibility and stuff like that. And then last week, while that was happening, while the big eclipse stuff was happening, I just didn't feel like taking recordings of myself and promoting the brand image was the right thing to do under a South Node eclipse in Leo. I just didn't feel like that was the move. So in order to practice what I preach here and really sort of pay attention to the astrology and sort of try to live in line with that and not just try to muscle capitalist productivity out of things, like in order to do what I say that I think is the right thing to do here, I just took a little time and didn't do that. I wouldn't say I took time off exactly. I did try to sleep for the first couple of days when I was back, but then there's always something to do. I'm going through a situation in my apartment right now. I think I've found some mold, and so I am kind of terrified about that, and been going through all that and getting equipment for that and sort of changing my lifestyle a little bit. So it's been a lot going on. Thank you so much for waiting for where we're going here. So I do want to talk a little bit about Ariana Grande's new album. Probably not. I'm probably not going to make it to that, although I do like it. And I had some initial solar eclipse thoughts about that, just because she is I think that the symbol for Leo looks a little bit like Ariana Grande, like with the high ponytail off to the side a little bit, you know what I mean? Like she's like doing the head turn situation. And so Leo always sort of makes me think about Ariana Grande because of her superstardom from always, she's like been a star since she was 16 or something like that. And Sun and Leo are associated not only with fame but also with babies, and so there's a resonance there. And then it's eclipse time here, and the South Node has just moved into Leo, and around that same time, then Ariana Grande decided that all of the attention she was getting was too much, and so she sort of bowed out of the spotlight for a little bit. I think that's an interesting development, but I don't have enough to say about that to really get there. What I am particularly interested in right now is, like if we think about eclipses as shadow moments where we lose visibility for a little while, an otherwise bright object like the sun or the full moon is cast into shadow. And so we get darkness where we would have expected light. And that creates a feeling of creepiness, of eerie and uncertainty that is a little bit destabilizing. And so it's destabilizing in one of two directions. If the eclipse is on the south node, then it'll tend to drain things. It'll do less of whatever it touches. And then if it's on the north node, then it'll tend to do more. It'll want to increase whatever it touches. And usually both of those are kind of unregulated decrease or increase. Decreasing and increasing things by their nature are not difficult or bad or pathological or something like that. But in the way that eclipses are associated with dragons, and what I always say about dragons is your arms are too short to box with dragons. Dragons do what they want to do, and they don't give a shit what you think about it. So in that kind of situation, then the increase and the decrease is not regulated in a way that, or moderated in a way that would be convenient for the human living the life. It is dragon style, where just like so much is happening, and so it turns into a problem, and so you get these increases and decreases, right? And so we currently have South Node in Leo, and so we would expect a decrease in a disruptive decrease in the Leo things, and so. If I were looking in an individual chart, which, by the way, if you want me to do a reading for you, you can go to ZamboniFunk.com. I bet you knew that already, but it is always a good time to remind you to go to ZamboniFunk.com and check out what is available for you there. But if I was looking in an individual chart, then I would look in the house that is in, and I would so like for me, for example, it's in my second house. And so second house is the place of money and resources and food and stuff like that. And so the thing that I always say about South Node eclipses in the second house is beware of the hole in your pocket. Like it's just so easy to lose money at a time like that. And it'll even be, it's not necessarily a difficulty in getting money. It's that the money just goes out again immediately. And so, in my case, I'm like concerned about like this apartment situation and all of that. Like I expect that to be a fairly expensive time. But then also I would look at the essential characteristics of Leo. And so Leo is associated with visibility and personality and brand identity and all of that sort of stuff. And so I would expect a disruptive decrease in that sort of situation. Now, I would especially, if I were thinking about like identity and that kind of thing, which is associated with the sort of solar, the central idea of the sun, like the sun is the not only the most visible object in the sky or in the world, but then also is the center of the solar system. Everything sort of revolves around the sun. And so there's this, if we think about brand or identity or something like that, then it's sort of the wellspring from which all of the, if it's brand, then you could think content or arts or products that come from that. Or if it's identity, then you can think about actions or behaviors or style or any of that sort of stuff. Like the center of that is the way that we might think about the sun, and with Leo there. Now, what you got to do in a technical astrological environment is you need to take a look at where the sun is and so you need to look at where the sun is and what condition the sun is in. So if you, for example, have the sun in Leo getting these South Node eclipses to it, then we absolutely would expect like a difficulty in producing visibility or attracting attention in the way that you want to, or maybe attracting attention that you don't want, that sort of causes you to flee into the shadows or something like that. Like this kind of thing is what I would expect there. And I would expect that in the area of the house. So if it was like, let's say this person has a Cancer rising with Leo in the second, but then has the sun there also in the second house, then I would expect like money to go out and for that to be associated with a disruptive change in the identity of this person, or how this person sort of goes about constituting themselves or building themselves up in some kind of way. We can associate the second house with food also, like in addition to not just money and resources or possessions, but then also the things that go into being who you are. Like the second is rising up to the first. And so it's the stuff that sort of wants to turn into who you are. So I would think about that kind of thing, right? And then I would also look at, if I were looking at a chart, I would also look at what is present in Leo, and then look at, so like if it's the sun there, then it's easy because the sun rules Leo, and so you've got overlap. But if it's Mars there, then like in the case of the Cancer rising, then you're going to have Mars ruling the 10th and Mars ruling the 5th. And so like the 10th in Aries and Scorpio in the 5th. And so you're going to want to talk about 5th house things and 10th house things being disrupted in a decrease kind of way, right? So that's how you do astrology. If you want to learn how to do that kind of thing, there's a course called Astrology from the Ground Up at ZamboniFunk.com. So but here, it's not really time to look at anyone's chart specifically in this like discussion environment. What I think is more interesting here to speak to is the cultural zeitgeist at large. And what's interesting is, so the sun is associated with visibility, and, like famous faces is a way to think about Leo. And celebrity will show up there sometimes. And it was really interesting. So I went out to the plant cutting conference, and the plant cutting conference is a dope ass environment. It's so cool. I love Isaac and AC so much. They hustle so hard. I can't believe these folks hustle. They just produce so much. Not only their podcast, which is extremely regular, which continues to come out, not just books and courses and herbal products and the garden and all of the rest. They do so much. It is so, I don't know, they're just great people. They produce so much, but then they're also just really lovely, and they're very good at facilitating people getting together and learning things, and community and loving each other. They're aware that what they're doing with the podcast has this global reach and whatever, but that it really comes down to how we live in our bodies in real life. And so they do what they can to foster IRL community. It's super cool. I love what they do. I love that I have had the honor of participating in that. I've been to a couple of conferences, and I've been to and I've been on the podcast for so long and this kind of thing. So it's really cool to be a part of that. So that was great. It was extremely difficult timing. So I left out the crib. I looked at the election that I looked, and so it wasn't an election specifically in the sense that like I did choose it, but I didn't choose it based on the astrology. I just chose it based on what time I was going to be there. And then my goal was to have a little time to hang out in the city, because I lived in the city for a while. And so I wanted to rap with some of my homies there, and then go out to the conference, which is in upstate New York, and then come back to the city for another couple of days, dab a couple of people up, and then bounce. That was my plan, right? But I left on the day of the Mercury station. And so Mercury had been retrograde for quite a while in Cancer, under a square from Saturn. Saturn is the planet of slowness and obstacles and difficulty and stuff like that. And I had real trouble just getting out in the first place. The first day of travel, I spent entirely in the airport, and my flight got delayed and ultimately canceled. And so they were just like, go home. like today's not the day. So I had to like get another bus ticket and go back to the crib and panic some more, you know what I mean? And had a day of like house cleaning and stuff. It was honestly not a bad time, but then had to go and do the whole airport thing again, and flight got delayed again, but not too bad. And so I was able to actually make it to New York. But then I was a couple of days behind, so I didn't have any time to hang out with my New York City people, and instead just went immediately to the conference. And I arrived at the conference like an hour and a half before my talk started. So there was no time to really settle in or anything like that. It was just difficult travel to straight on the stage. And then I got on the stage and I gave this talk, and it was really interesting to me because I gave this talk that was many of the themes that I've described here on this, especially like in the Figure It Out Loud episodes where I'm just kind of like vamping and talking about the things that are interesting to me. I touched on a lot of those same themes. And what's interesting is I didn't exactly know, like I had some themes that I wanted to touch on and some stuff that I wanted, like I had points that I wanted to make, but I didn't have a talk written out per se. And I went in and I just kind of did my thing. I did what I do. And I was concerned on the way up. I was like, I don't really know if this is going to go. Like, I say this shit all the time. It's all, you know. And then I was in front of a group of people who don't listen to this podcast and who don't hear me talk about this all the time and who don't hear my thoughts all day in the way that I do. And I was putting together ideas that people had never heard before, and that was really moving to people. And it was cool to, like, I was saying things that were pretty normal to me, but that people came up to me afterward. Many people came up to me afterward and said that they had been, that it had really moved them or touched them, and had made them think things and that were important and, or that felt meaningful to them and this kind of thing. It was really cool to hear. But immediately after that, then somebody came up and was like, hey, so you're going to do readings, right? And I was like, oh yeah, obviously I'm going to do readings. I didn't even think about that. So I started doing readings, and then I just did readings the whole time. I got very little time to socialize, to like be there with people, to like, there was especially one person who I wanted to talk to, Richard Mandelbaum, who has been on this show a couple of times and who is a teacher who I had when I was in herb school. I'm getting kind of old, you guys. This was 14 years ago. But yeah, at that time I had this teacher who was really influential on me, and I think he's the best. And he still teaches at Arbor Vitae School of Traditional Western Herbalism. It's not in New York City anymore. Where is it now? Upstate New York, Ithaca, maybe? That feels wrong. Something like that. You can look it up. It's on the internet. But yeah, so I wanted to like talk to this guy because he was also speaking there. And so it was really cool for me to be speaking on the same bill as one of my teachers was. Like, it really felt like I was getting grown in that moment. You know what I mean? Like I was a big kid now. So I was really excited to talk to him. And, you know, I've like talked to him a couple of times on the show or whatever, but haven't had any like in-person time with him since I was in school. So, you know, 14 years ago or whatever. And so it was super cool to see him. But so somebody there, while I was like talking to the people, I forget who it was, but somebody said that it was being said that I was a celebrity astrologer, which is a funny way to describe me. I don't feel like people in the community, in the astrology community, definitely do know who I am, but I'm not a luminary in the like a celebrity. Like, that to me is Chris Brennan. That's Austin Coppock. That's a Stephen Forrest. That's Channing Nicholas. You know what I mean? Like, these are big names in the industry. And I, like, astrologers kind of know who I am, but like, I don't even spend time on Twitter and stuff. So I actually wonder a little bit about that. But, you know, I've spoken at a conference or two. I spoke at North Star last year and whatever. So people know me and whatever, but celebrity feels like a lot. But it was how people felt about me in the space. Like, one of the things that I noticed was I would, you know, I had a lot of people coming up to me and talking to me and stuff. And so we would do introductions, you know, we're like shaking hands in groups and stuff like that and doing names and everything. And then I would be like, yeah, I'm Zamboni. And they would be like, I know. And that was like, it really felt funny to me. I actually don't like that very much. I don't like it when people are like, I know, in that space. Like, the appropriate thing to do would be like, nice to meet you, you know. But people really, I don't know, it felt like a separator to me. Like, I couldn't be just one of the people. Like, I felt like I needed a green room a little bit. And it was like, so every time I would be trying to hang out with Richard, for example, then somebody would come up and try to get on my schedule or have a question about astrology or have a question about herbalism that they wanted to talk to Richard about. So, because he was in the same space, he was a, you know, like a teacher or whatever. And so it was a situation where it was like there was a legitimate separation between me and the attendees of the conference. And so that was an interesting thing that I wasn't really prepared for. I didn't know how to navigate that exactly. Like, I've done star time before, you know, like I've played shows and stuff, and then you come off the stage and then, you know, you kind of got to like shake all the hands and kiss all the babies and stuff, you know, like I've been in that space before, but it really did feel like there was a legitimate difference that, like, I was trying to equalize it a lot by, you know, like, I'm standing there barefoot and just and shaking hands and being like, oh yeah, and this is my name, and, or like introducing myself to people, you know, and then people being kind of, you know, like reluctant to put themselves on my level. Was kind of how that read to me when people were like, oh, I know who you are, you know, like they didn't want to be that themselves or recognize that they weren't that themselves. And so I had this problem actually a lot when I was in school. Back in college, I sang in an a cappella group, and I sang the lead in that. And at that time, that was like my most anarchist period. And so I didn't really believe in hierarchy at all at that time. I was sort of like, abolish all the hierarchy. I definitely don't feel that way now. I think that there's such a thing as earned hierarchy and such. But that was my most pushing toward equality moment in my life. And so I didn't want to hog all the spotlight by singing the lead and like being the lead of the group. And the director of that band or that singing group had to stop and be like, look, man, you're doing a job right now. Like, your job is to sing the lead, to be the thing that people are looking at. We need, like, that is an important job in the show. We need the star to happen. So you gotta be the star. And I was uncomfortable with it at that time, and was uncomfortable with that for a while until I did some sun magic, honestly, and sort of like connected with that space, and then got famous a little bit on the internet or whatever, you know, especially in 2020 was when that happened. And so in doing that, I sort of have, I don't know, it feels to me like, all right, so you might have heard me talk about how I think that questions are the most important thing in the world. I think that I keep coming back to this question of what is it seems to me to be the most important question that exists. So if you can figure out what a thing is, then you can figure out how that thing most appropriately can be placed in order to harmonize with the others. So if you know what shape a thing is, then you know what the thing is, then you know how it best interacts with everyone else around it. And that right relationship, that harmonic relationship, is the sort of ideal or best case scenario, the highest moral good we could think of, right? So the question, what is it, is a very important question, maybe the most important question to ask. And so what I notice about this sort of celebrity situation is that what it is seems to be a real thing. It doesn't seem to be like one person hogging the spotlight. It seems to be, or artificially creating a tier for elites or something like that, and then putting themselves in that. It seems to be a real thing. It seems to be a like legitimate divide that I tried to evade, but could not, because I think that people were really responding to a genuine condition, which is that they were looking up at me and feeling like I was in this other special space. So I think that that is a legitimate thing that was actually happening in that space. And so then what I noticed was, so I had these people coming up to me all the time, and so I didn't have a green room. And so if I wanted to not engage in that environment, then for the most part, I had to hide. I just had to go be where the people were not. I had to go to my tent and just like lie down. That was the only thing that I could do in order to not be like in order to not just have to field all of this attention the whole time. You know what I mean? And got people like trying to get on my schedule, and you know, and then got readings to do, and then, you know, so I was working the whole time. So by the time that I got back, then from that event, which was really great, and I'm really glad to have been a part of it, I was so tired because I had been working so hard the whole time, and the travel didn't get better after that first voyage. Then leaving was also difficult, and getting back to the city, and just everything was tragic. I actually had great subway train luck, which was really interesting to me. Like, trains arrived right when I got to the stations, and they would be fairly empty trains. Like, I typically got seats. So that was interesting and fun. And it was a nice change from the interstate voyages, you know, like the airports and all that stuff. That was all of the airports and the trains and stuff like that. Like the train from Poughkeepsie to New York City got canceled as well, and so I had to figure that out. You know, like all of that stuff was super difficult, but the subway trains were really easy. So I don't know. I have no idea what to make of that, but that's a thing. So, but yeah, so I got back and was super exhausted and didn't exactly know what to do next with myself. And then Stephen Forrest happened. So solar eclipses in Leo, you know, so during my time as a celebrity astrologer at this event, you know, I realized the difficulty of being the solar star power, star of the show figure, you know, like, just fielding all of this attention is its own job that I had to sort of come to terms with a little bit, right? So that feels to me like solar difficulty with solar eclipses happening in Leo. And that's just like seasonal time. You know what I mean? I think we're going to lean into this more over the next year and a half while we have eclipses in this space. But then I got back and then so we would expect like a fall from grace from a famous face, a decrease in visibility or something like that, or an increase in like a disruptive bit of attention that makes you flee for the shadows or something like that, right? So then Stephen Forrest got on a podcast. This Stephen Forrest situation is crazy. Most of you who are listening to this show have probably heard this before because you're listening to an astrologer online, so you probably are a little bit aware. But I'm going to go ahead and tell a story. So Stephen Forrest is this major luminary in the astrology space. He wrote one of the most important or most famous books, I would say, in beginning astrology. It's called Inner Sky. It was a very important book for me when I was a baby astrologer. It was the second book that I read that really helped me to get into a place where I could do readings, where I understood how a reading could happen, like what it even means to look at a chart and see stuff in it. Like it was a really good foundational text for me. Now, I don't subscribe to modern rulerships anymore, and I'm not an evolutionary astrologer, and so like it's not a school that I really resonate with anymore, so it's not like my shit, but it was important to me when I was a baby. And so Stephen Forrest is like, and he's a really big deal. He's getting older at this point, but he was a really major figure in the 70s and 80s in sort of popularizing astrology at that time. And so the United Astrology Conference is coming up pretty soon. It's going to be taking place in Chicago. Chicago's pretty close to where I live at in Missouri. And so it's what is it? The biggest astrology conference in the Anglosphere. It's like the World Cup for astrology a little bit. Like it happens only every 4 years. It changes location all the time. It's not always even in the United States. Like it's a really big deal. All of the star players are going to be there. You know what I mean? So because it's going to be happening so close to where I live at in Missouri, I was like, okay, I got to go this time and go say what's up to the folks. I didn't go last time. And I haven't been to an astrology conference since 2019. A bunch of us went to NORWAC 2019, and it was that was the last one before the world ended in 2020. And so we had to, so the whole industry shifted after that and everything. But so I went to that one and then haven't been to an astrology conference, except for I spoke at NORWAC last time, or North Star, not NORWAC. I didn't speak at NORWAC. I spoke at North Star in Portland, which was as much a magic conference as it was an astrology conference. And and plant cutting conferences are not astrology conferences. They're herbalist conferences where there are some astrologers as well. So I haven't really been to an astrology conference in a minute, and it's going to be a good idea for me to go to it, right? And so I volunteered there, and so my plan is to work the event, and I volunteered to work Stephen Forrest's post-conference workshop. And so I was kind of excited to do that because Stephen Forrest did play this important role in my foundations as an astrologer. Now, what I didn't know at the time of volunteering for that is that Stephen Forrest was going to go on a podcast and say the N-word with his whole chest. He really got in there, y'all. It felt to me like he had been waiting to get that one off. Like he really just he missed the thrust of it was like back in my day you used to be able to tell a joke. And he told a story about how he used to say the word at conferences or like at a talk or something like that, and it would rile people up. And then he describes that as medicine for what ails us. So like the medicine for racism is saying the word in front of people, get people talking, I guess, something like that. I don't think it was a particularly coherent argument, but that was kind of like where he was at with it, and he was feeling some kind of way about how that kind of attitude has fallen out of favor, and so you can't really do that anymore. And he seemed kind of bummed about it. And there's this black dude on the podcast, Ricky Williams, is that right? Who has honestly a cool ass story. I don't know this guy, but he was a professional football player for several years and then is now doing astrology. I think that's cool as fuck. But anyway, that's mostly relevant because the two of them were talking, and we can guess that a football player is familiar with the term. You know what I mean? So, the whole thing, like, Stephen Forrest is like, you know the N-word, right? And Ricky's like, yeah, I know the one. He's like, you know the one, right? And Ricky's like, yeah, I know the one. And then Stephen Forrest goes in and says the word with all his might. And looks kind of smug about it. And, and then goes on to, like, I don't know. He's like, his point is, he's proving that he's not a racist. And sure, whatever, dude. In general, I'm not a big cancel culture kind of guy. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I feel like carceral punishment is just not as effective at making the world a better place as we wanted it to be. And so, like, I have this question about, like, alright, so if, like, does it help us to get on Stephen Forrest? Here's the thing. I was not listening to Stephen Forrest before this happened. I already, like I said, I'm not an evolutionary astrologer. I think the idea that Neptune rules Pisces, it just is much less useful when reading charts than the idea that Jupiter rules Pisces. Like, the Thema Mundi lays out, which is the Thema Mundi is said to be the astrological chart of the world, or the universe, or the world, we could say, and it's used as a teaching tool to show you how astrology works. It is beautiful. It is really, really instructive and lays everything out in this beautifully symmetrical way that works really well. And so I don't see a need to disrupt that by giving Pisces to Neptune. Certainly not by giving Aquarius to Uranus. I beef with that one in a big way. If, like, giving a Saturn sign to Uranus because Aquarius likes being weird is a fundamental misunderstanding of what Aquarius is to my reading of it. But then also giving Scorpio to Pluto, like Pluto and Scorpio and Neptune and Pisces, those make more sense to me. I don't think rulership is the way to do that. I think that those planets are something more like exalted in those spaces. I have talked about that before. I don't really need to get into the technical specifics of it. what I'm saying is that evolutionary astrology isn't really my thing. I wasn't really paying attention to Stephen Forrest before this. The only reason I tuned into this podcast was to hear him say the word. And I also wanted to hear what it was like in context. Maybe he said it in a context that was going to make me feel differently about it. He did not. But the thing is, like, I don't think that, like, I think that he was kind of tone deaf. The whole thing felt clueless to me. It didn't feel racist as much as it felt uncool. Just like, read the room, my man. What are you doing? Why are you doing this to us and yourself right now? Why are you so committed to saying this word in front of everybody right now? Because you like think it's edgy or something? Like, why? You know what I mean? But I don't know that flaming the dude up actually helps us to live in a less racist, safer environment. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't think that I don't know that was the thing. I don't know that it actually made things better. What's interesting, okay, so solar eclipse, see this guy fall from grace, right? Like this major luminary figure falls from grace. And so anyone who is associated with celebrity right now might want to watch their back a little bit. That includes me. I was recently called a celebrity astrologer, even though I don't necessarily feel like a celebrity. That was given to me, and I acknowledged a little earlier that there was something real about that. So I need to be aware of this. This is something that I need to be aware of. But one of the interesting things about where we are in society right now is that this idea of celebrity or fame has been democratized in a way that is pathological even. Like, celebrity probably has always been pathological for as long as there have been celebrities. So we'll say that goes back to maybe 100 years or something like that, you know, like, so if we look 1926, we're starting to get the development of movie stars and stuff like that, you know, like, probably not too long before that. You might get radio personalities before that or something like that, but before mass communication, you don't really have that. You have something that is much more localized and probably not really akin to what we think of as celebrity. If you think of like a Tom Cruise or something like that, that's like Bad Bunny occupies a different space in fame and culture than, you know, like even a legendary figure like a Johnny Appleseed or something like that. Like, it's just going to be a different life. You know what I mean? So this idea of celebrity is only about a year or 100 years old, only about a century old or something like that. But there's, you know, there's nothing new under the sun, right? You know, everything that exists in the universe, and that's part of the reason why I love the theme of Mundi so much, because it's like this ancient conception of how the world am, and it just elegantly fits everything in the world. Even things that don't exist yet, that didn't exist at the time of the conception of the Thema Mundi, those things can be wrapped into this way of understanding the world, and it works. It's fucking amazing. I love the Thema Mundi so much, and I love just astrology. Like, the craft of astrology is amazing to me. Where did it come from? Where did Nechepso get the idea to put the thing? I'm amazed. Anyway, okay, so celebrity is this new concept, and celebrity and fame have been democratized by social media. So we're in this moment where all of the kids feel like they can be performing for an audience. In fact, they likely feel like they are performing for an audience at all times, in the same way that someone, like, I'm a little more grown, I wouldn't consider myself a kid anymore, but I still find myself thinking of ideas and being like, oh, that would be a good thing to say on the podcast, that would be a good thing to make a video about, that would be a good thing to make a post about. I don't make too many written posts or anything like that, but, you know, like, that thought would make a good tweet. That kind of thought. My thesis here is that children feel that way at all times. They don't really know the difference between the real world and the virtual world, because the virtual world is real to them in this way where that's where they spend their time, that's where they spend the moments of their lives, and it's how they interact with others who are also in that space. It's a little like the way that I consider sleep and dreams to be real, because you spend a third of your life in that space. And so to simply write it off as nothing, and in fact, I have this thought that, like, sleep is kind of the prototypical state. Like, it's waking up is kind of the newer innovation. But if you, like, I think that probably plants, which are older than animals, exist in a state that is more like sleep than wakefulness, and they just live their whole lives there, and that is a more primitive, primeval way of living, and wakefulness comes out of that. This is a difficult thing to prove, but that's my idea, and that's my sense of things. So, in the same way that sleep is real because you spend a third of your life in that space, and so it's foolish to simply discount that. You know, like, if somebody had an 8-hour-a-day screen situation, I would not be at all surprised by that. You know what I mean? Lots of times, the number gets higher than that. And so people are spending as much time on screens and in virtual life as, or more, as they spend asleep. And so the idea that it's not real, that the time isn't real, that the world isn't real, that the space isn't real, just kind of falls flat. That can't be true. So, you know, it gets real, it turns into the Matrix, where it's like, what do you think is real? You know what I mean? But you know, like, people really are spending their time there. People are really having their interactions and having meaningful experiences there, both positive and negative. So if that's happening, then that's real enough to me. So kids are spending so much time in this space, and because of the way that social media works, social media has this way of broadcasting one's own self or ideas or brand or thoughts or videos or whatever. It's you broadcast your performance of yourself on the internet, and all of us do it, and sometimes some people get a little bit of fame, or even a lot of bit of fame. You know, you can think about the Hop Tool Girl or whatever, off of this space. And so celebrity and fame are now in this democratized place where everyone has access to it, and it could happen to anyone. And so my guess is that the pathology of fame and celebrity is likely to be found in more places as well. During this time where we've got these eclipses going on in Leo and Aquarius. So we've got a year and a half of the nodes being in the south node in Leo and the north node in Aquarius. We will get eclipses every 6 months in those spaces. During that time, I would expect to see lots of problematic, pathological, difficult, disruptive engagement with fame, celebrity, and performance, broadcast performance. I don't think that we're going to see a reduction in that. I expect to see pathological disruption in that space. Where we get, like the fall from grace around celebrity figures, or, kings are also associated with Leo, and so that's going to be heads of state of any sort, like that kind of thing, or heads of, it doesn't have to be the head of state, you could be the head of a company, or you could be the head of a community institution or something like that, like all that sort of stuff is going to be sort of, it's going to need to be investigated here. Now, what I think is particularly interesting in this moment, and here, I'm going to take you as far as I've gotten with this idea. I'm not sure where this idea terminates yet because I haven't gotten there yet. But I think, so my whole thing, what I'm finding more and more is that I care very deeply about morality. Like, what should I be doing with my life? And because we're in this moment where religion isn't doing that job anymore, we're not sure about religion and spirituality as a culture, and so we have lost the tools for figuring out how we should live. And so we're in this moment where we're not sure how that works. And so I am working on a theory of how we can find for ourselves what is right to do. I find that I am obsessed with this question, and I like so much of what I do is kind of centered around that. And as so the way to, so I sort of frame that a lot as moving toward the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, right? So the right thing for me to do with my life would be to make the world a better place and to move toward the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. I know that this iteration of the world is not the best world that could exist, and my best thing to do would be to move toward a better, more beautiful world than this one that I currently live in. And so I think a lot about how to do that, and I notice that the space of politics is so corrupt and so polluted that it is disgusting. Like, I am disgusted to think about touching it or to be close to it. I've mentioned that a voter democracy is literally a popularity contest, and therefore kind of gross on its face. Like, I remember being in school and being like, if you ever said that something was a popularity contest, then it was derisive. You know what I mean? But then we turn that into a voter democracy, and we think that that's going to be a real thing, and that's just not. It feels gross to me, right? So the whole political arena feels gross to me in a way that makes me not want to put my time and effort there. And I don't think that that is the way that we create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. In fact, I feel like politics is downstream from culture. And so, especially because I don't see myself or most of the people who I know having any real political influence, especially at the greater level. You know what I mean? Like, to me, presidential elections feel like bread and circuses. It feels like the circus bit of the bread and circuses. Like, it's all for show, which is why a TV star will do, or a movie star will excel in that environment, because it's performative. The whole thing is show and performance. But the show and performance that resonates with the people is going to be the one that is culturally legible. And so, if we can create a culture that is more beautiful, then the politics that are downstream from that culture will reflect that, and we'll be able to generate frameworks of legislation, maybe, or something like that, that help us to create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. So, in order to create culture, then what we need are cultural elites. That's an interesting thing to think about. So, you all know that I have been very interested in CJDX recently. CJDX is a YouTuber. I super recommend going to his YouTube channel and watching, I don't know, probably like the 9 most recent videos or something like that. The rest of them, the older ones, turn a little more into media analysis, and there's just like a little, they feel fluffier. But especially from Bo Burnham and beyond, CJDX's analysis is so on point and so moving that I highly recommend it, and it's been really highly influential to me and my way of thinking recently. And CJDX cites W. David Marks a lot, and he wrote this book, Status and Culture, where which I have not read, but I guess that in this book he talks about how culture, like how status seeking, how being and becoming high status is like the central thing that humans are doing all the time. And so because of that dynamic, then if you get figures who are high status, then everyone tries to be like them. And so if we are going to create a culture that is, morally good, that is in right relationship to the world around us in this harmonious kind of way, then we will need cultural elites. That is to say, people who are high status, who are cool, leading the way, leading the charge on that. And so it seems like the people who are interested in creating the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible need to concern ourselves with the manufacture of cultural elites. I don't know how that's done exactly, except by being cool, which has been a thing that I've been after for a really long time. You can like check out the music, or you can check out the artwork associated with the music, or look at some of my personal style, and or the way that I curate memes on my Instagram account, or these kinds of things. You know, like that. I see myself as a curator of culture, and like with memes, I sort of like look through all the memes and select the good ones, and then put those out into the world and be like, here is the good stuff. Here are the good jokes. Here are the ideas that we should. Gordon White said, "It matters which ideas you think with." Here are some ideas that we as a culture should think with in order that we might move toward the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And sardonic humor is going to be a part of that, because sardonic humor is cool, because everybody relates to it. Like, there's this status and coolness of memes and of everything that is important. And then I make music that's really cool. Like, I have a hip-hop album, and I like, go listen to Java. It's fucking dope. So being cool is necessary. But also, so the thing that I run into, like, so my song Thank You, for example, and I've mentioned this before, it's got this positive feeling to it. And when you create positive feeling culture, then it has this problem where it turns into, it feels corny. It starts to feel corny. And what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, why would something like Future or Kevin Gates or, you know, like, I want to call it like COINTELPRO hip hop, you know, like the very worst messages possible for the community are the ones that have the most cultural appeal. Why is that? What is going on there? And how do we make a better version that doesn't come off feeling like Christian rock? You know what I mean? Like, Christian rock is so toothless. It doesn't feel like rock does. At least didn't when I was Christian and like investigating the alternatives. I remember being 13 years old and being like, I'm gonna get into Christian metal. I was like listening to a lot of metal at that time, and then also Christian hip hop, and it just didn't bang as hard as, I'm 13, DMX did at that time. You know what I mean? Like, Wayne was was becoming a thing at that time. And Wayne, like Lil Wayne, I love Lil Wayne. I think he's a great lyricist. I think he says hilarious shit all the time. I think the beats are really dope. I think that, like, I really like Lil Wayne. But the messages that he's bringing to the community are fucking awful. So how do we go on to manufacture cultural elites that are legitimately high status, that also bring us toward the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible? This, I think, is what we have to do if we're going to move toward that more beautiful world. And my hope is that solar eclipses or eclipses in the sun's sign, Leo, will disrupt the celebrity class in such a way as to make possible cultural elites which are genuinely high status and also aligned with the more beautiful world that my heart knows is possible. Is that what I hope? I at least hope that these eclipses will be insightful as to what that will be or can do. I'm very much anticipating what CJ the X will say next, because I know that he's working on a status essay video, and I know that he has also been working explicitly around this topic of like I've heard him talk about Discord servers, because Discord servers are just kind of that like they lack status elites, and so like you can have moderators and stuff, but like those are almost, they have this feeling of imposition. They feel like cops in a way that like it is not culturally elite. It's not high status. It is just the band hammer, you know? So, but they're, and so Discord communities or a lot of like online spaces, they really sort of just expect you, like, if everybody is just cool and chill all the time, then they work. But in the event that that doesn't happen, then you can have these situations where one person who is the most online and the most wild with it is just more aggressive than everyone else, and that can kind of like pull a space into a bad place that can be harmful, or that can make the community not desirable or feel like a place that you want to be. And so so I know that he is thinking deeply on that topic. I think he's headed in the right direction, and I'm thinking more and more in that kind of way as well, where I'm like, how do we make the world a better place? And I also think that a voter democracy is kind of dumb, because it's just a popularity contest, and it's corruptible, not only from the popularity side of things, like the one who has the most algorithmically salient tweets and memes is the most popular candidate. So it's corruptible from that direction, but then it's also corruptible from the space of like, like gerrymandering and like all that sort of shit. Like there's gotta be a way, and that's as far as I have it right now. So know that to have made it this far in this thought has been a lot of work, and I don't know where I'm going with this yet, but real quick, I forgot to close the loop on the Stephen Forrest thing. The reason why I told you that I volunteered to do the post-conference workshop is to demonstrate skin in the game. Like I care about that space, and I am actually involved in the situation in some kind of way. But B, I had been concerned that my participation in that workshop could be read as support for either Stephen Forrest the man, or for the deed, for like the I don't know, Stephen Forrest, like freedom to say whatever words he wants to say or something like that. And so that actually made me pretty nervous for a second. So ultimately Stephen Forrest got canceled. So he's not going to be speaking at UAC anymore. I'm sort of interested actually to see if he is going to attend that event. But that notwithstanding, he isn't going to be performing there anymore. And so that means that I don't have to be involved in whatever post-conference workshop or anything like that. So I don't need to worry about whether or not it's going to reflect on me. But, like, he did sort of hide behind Ricky in his, he made some like sorry not sorry statements on the way, like after the whole thing blew up. Then he sort of like made some bad apologies and said some stuff that was basically like I say what I want. You know what I mean? Like it was very non-apologetic. And then he was like, listen, I'm not a racist. Just ask Ricky. And so he was sort of hiding behind his co-host's blackness, and sort of put Ricky into a spot where he had to choose between presumably his friend and associate, and somebody he probably looks up to because he's an older astrologer in the space and stuff like that, an elder and all this sort of stuff. So he versus like his whatever. I actually don't know what Ricky thinks about I probably shouldn't even call him Ricky by his first name. We're not on a first name basis. He doesn't know me. I don't know him. But I don't have any idea what he thinks about the N-word or Stephen Forrest's use of it or any of that. Like I have no idea what he thinks about any of that. But assuming like what I sort of read on the podcast, just like watching him just sort of like trying to slow him down a little bit before he just kind of like hauls off and uses the word. It looked like he was kind of not enthusiastic about it in that moment, so he putting Ricky Williams in that spot where he has to sort of like vouch for one side or the other is kind of gross, and I didn't like that. And to my knowledge, he actually hasn't spoken about the issue at all. So I respect that. I'm so interested in what he has to say about it, but I also hope that he never has to, ever. You know what I mean? If he decides to just be silent about it forever, I support that in him, even though I'm so interested in what he thinks about it. But because of that situation, I was concerned that Stephen Forrest was going to do the same thing for me. Like, if I didn't blow his whole shit up, then he was going to use that as a way to prove to the world that he isn't racist because I, a black person, didn't roast his whole shit. Like, and I didn't want to, I was worried about being in that situation. So I was worried about him hiding behind me, and I was worried about the wider community reading it as support for him. And I didn't want either of those things to happen. So, but I also didn't want to like refuse to do the event because it's not the volunteer coordinator's fault that Stephen Forrest said something objectionable on a podcast. Like, UAC as an organization, like a lot of people came out and wanted to be all like UAC is supporting the rise of fascism and stuff like that because they chose Chicago or they chose downtown Chicago, or these are some arguments that I've heard, like knowing that ICE is around Chicago and the downtown Marriott is a known whatever, you know what I mean? Like these arguments fall apart as far as I'm concerned. Like, UAC is doing something super cool, which is getting a bunch of astrologers together and coordinating this massive event, which is extremely difficult to do. And I don't know if you've looked, but the astrology looks rough during that time. And so they're really striving uphill here, and my hat's off to them, honestly. I will do a little report when I come back, and we'll see how I feel after it's all done. I've never actually interacted with UAC before, but I know what it is to organize an event, and it's extremely difficult. And this event is like 2 weeks long or something like that. And my guess is that astrologers are going to it's going to be like herding cats. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a lot. And so with that in mind, I want to help the volunteer organizer or the volunteer staff out. I want to help, you know what I mean? And so those folks don't need a new headache because I decided not to do the thing that I said I was going to do. So I was stuck. I was in a spot. Now, ultimately, UAC did cancel Stephen Forrest, and so he's not going to speak. I think he had 3 things he was going to do, and now he's not going to do any of them, I think. And so so that means that I don't have to do the workshop anymore, which is great because I don't want to have to publicly, honestly, opine either way. Like I said before, I don't really think that Stephen Forrest is like he's just not the future, you know what I mean? So I kind of don't care. It all felt like water is wet. Like a 77-year-old dude whose family has roots in the Ku Klux Klan is like wishes that he could say the N-word some more. Like, okay, what else is new? You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't feel like news to me. It doesn't feel like it's that big a deal to me. So, and I don't know that like paying all of this attention to it, like the only way to kill a troll is to starve it, right? So what if we just starved the N-word of its glory, you know? Like, because you could tell that Forrest was like very excited to say it and knew that it was going to get a rise, and like it felt a little thrill seeking almost. So like, what if it just wasn't thrilling to do? And also, how long is this going to be a thing? How long do we have to litigate the fucking N-word? Like, imagine that it's 2326. Imagine it's 300 years from now. Are we still going to be mad about the N-word at that point? Like, when is the cutoff? Exactly. I'm not saying that it should have been already, but I'm not saying that either. I don't know. I don't know when it should be. But should there be a moment when it's like, all right, we can let this one rest? You know what I mean? Like, do we need to continue to be mad about the same things over and over, always for the rest of time? I'm not sure about that. But most importantly, I didn't have to make that decision this week. You know what I mean? We can like continue to think it through over time and stuff like that. And I don't have to necessarily come out, and I don't, like, no one needs to feel betrayed by me by not being on the cancellation squad, or by being on the cancellation squad and then not doing the things that I said I was going to do for the volunteer organization situation and like all of that. Like, I don't have to do that right now, and I'm very grateful, honestly, that UAC did that. Also, I'm grateful for that because the Copics had said that they weren't going to come to the event anymore if Stephen Forrest was allowed to continue and participate. And so I do care what the Copics think, and I do care about seeing them at like industry events. So if we had kept Stephen Forrest, but I didn't get to see Austin and Caitlin Kopic, I would have felt some feelings about that. Would not have liked that. So I am grateful that it turned out the way that it did. But I'm interested to see where this goes from here. And this goes a little bit to what I've been, the other point, the main point that I've made, which was that cultural elites, like in the way that the Copics are cultural elites, you can tell that the Copics are cultural elites because Sphere and Sundry, everybody is just all about Sphere and Sundry. It's the coolest shit anybody's ever seen, and everybody loves it. And Austin, you can't even get into his classes. You can't get his book. His book auctions on eBay for $4 million or whatever. Like, this shows you the kind of cultural capital that these two yield. And so, and honestly, I think that they're cool. I think they're doing cool things. They are like, they're legitimately high status and also doing things which are directionally appropriate toward the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. And so how can we go about manufacturing or generating more of these kinds of cultural elites? And like, I brought them, like, they're not going to like that I use their name right here. And that, like, I don't, anytime you sort of focus in on specific individuals, then under scrutiny, shit's going to be weird. You know what I mean? And like, that's not what I'm trying to do right now. I'm not trying to invite scrutiny on these folks. I'm not trying to make messiahs out of these folks. I'm trying to say that there is genuine, like, they have genuine high status in a way that Stephen Forrest doesn't have in anybody under 50 years old. And I think that shows that the culture is moving in a good direction. But if we are specific and intentional about the way that we want to cultivate status and which things we want to make cool/high status, if we can figure out the mechanisms for working that, then we can do well for ourselves. Okay, for real, I'm done this time. I love you. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.